what it is that he's in stress or something.
I have one class of freshman this year, but just one small.
That's the last thing I remember about it. That's the last thing that didn't yeah, maybe I will when I do.
Let's go.
I don't think you're gonna steal it. One is in Spanish, too.
No, I have both lots of times. He was so
I'm not memorable.
No, he was so confused by all the staff and people who just didn't agree.
I don't think I ever snapped you. I don't know about that. Nothing my fault. I shared.
I've got.
It was just sad. Reflection. Here, center on this reflection.
I want to repeat myself for those that are coming in later. I record my classes for classroom use only, so this class goes up on BlackBoard tomorrow. So if someone has to go home for a sick child or that type of thing, that they can make that decision and see it on BlackBoard later. But understand that that means that this is going up to my channel on YouTube. It's a private channel, but it is going to my private channel on YouTube and going back to my BlackBoard. And so as you're talking things, remind one another if people start to use names or talk about things that they wouldn't want to be recorded. And the other thing is, if we're going to talk specifically about your paper or whatever, grab me and pull me away from this machine over here, because otherwise everybody's going to hear that whole conversation. That is obviously, if you hear it once, people aren't all going to run tomorrow morning and go pick this up. But you can see there's some folders that aren't here, and if they show up 45 minutes from now, and I'm done with talking about the syllabus, then they can get on tomorrow and pick that piece of it up. So that's why I do it. It doesn't stay there forever, but it's there for people that have other commitments or issues that conflict with this class. In the beginning of your folder, you should have a form that's coming back to me, and this is just for me to keep during this class with information, because sometimes it's the fastest way I can go and get information when I need it. This goes back in your folder when you're done. So that's when you're in class, the way you turn things back into me is you put it back in this folder so I don't have lots of piles of things. It keeps things organized for me. And we will talk about the reflective piece as I go through a little bit with the syllabus. So the handouts that you do have should be a calendar. That calendar is for you to pull out and take home with you. I got that calendar has little squares on it, so you can even keep your scores if you want to play along as we go through the semester. You can see then the classes that are in bold, dark print, you will be in this room. The ones that are not in bold, dark print, you will get on your machine sometime and watch me and email stuff back to me or through BlackBoard. I am moving, the master's program has moved to an entirely hybrid format. The doctorate program I'm going to move as fast as our faculty can make that move, because it takes a lot of technology and things, and so as you go through the program, I can't tell you which class will go, but the feedback that I have from the master's program is we like it hybrid because we like to see each other once in a while, and we like to have this kind of networking opportunities. We don't want to just sit out there with a machine and talk about leadership. On the other hand, we're busy people, and if you can cut down the number of times, so I move things around. I usually in this class did half the night seminar and half the night more lecture style types of things. And so what I've done is moved and said instead of half and half in a night, I've gone to every other time, so that when we are doing the ones that are in the bold, the face-to-face meetings, those will be almost entirely seminar style, which is why you are set in the groups that you are in, because you have just been assigned to a seminar group. And the only criteria that I used with assigning was we have a number of people in here that are UNO employees, we have a number of people that are public school employees and so forth, and I was just trying to get mixes of groups, because if I didn't, it would be all of the coaches sitting here at a table together that they talk to each other all day long. In my mind, that's what they do. Anyway, no, they never see each other. They run down the hall and say, yeah, I understand, but I'm teasing you. But anyway, they'd all sit together. And I want them to know you and you to know them and so forth. So that's why I arbitrarily put people in groups by the color of their folder. And on those nights that we have seminar, when you come in the first part, this is the group you'll meet with. Later on, we'll need to do other things and everybody get up and wander around and do things. But when you come to class, the very first thing you'll do is meet with this group. That way, when something like this, we have somebody that's not quite here, this group can go ahead and get started and make things happen and not have to sit there and wait for every person to be here. On the other hand, by 5:15, we'll be doing something else. So, that's what this calendar is here for, and you might want to keep it handy because you can write things about when stuff's due and what you want to do. I make it in a calendar format so you can kind of put it in with your schedule, and I also coordinated it with Dr. Smith so that it doesn't mean he's going as hybrid as I am. He's not, but when he's having the nights that he's having you do individual projects, those are also going to be nights that we're not here as well. So we did as best as we could for that.
That's very impressive.
To help you out. Well,
Thank you.
we are both graduates of this program. You remember. So anyway, you might want to have that handy. Secondly, then there is the actual syllabus, and I will go through the assignment pieces on the back, because one of the things you know when you start a class is there's only two things that's on anybody's mind that comes into your class, whether they are preschool children or graduate students. They want to know who's this person up in front, and a corollary of that is, and what does that person want from me? And until you get those two questions answered, you can go do some great, bonding activity with other students in the class, but what they're thinking about is this in the lines or out of the lines? How's the procedures going? So I'm going to stop first and do the procedural part. I'm showing it all to you now so that you don't go home and cry. That's not what I'm showing it for you. I'm showing it for you so that you can figure out that if your family's going out of town on this week, that you say, that's not the week that I'm going to be the presenter for my study group. And you can make those plans. Some people plan and load early into the semester. You can turn in stuff early. You can turn in stuff as early as you want to. It doesn't bother me. Other people say, you know what? I got this 1 week that I have some less opportunities to do other things. I'm going to focus in then, and so people go at their own rates within this. I also am very much aware that people are at different places within the program in here. And I expect a different type of paper based on where you are in the program. That doesn't mean better or worse. It means some people have more of the questions figured out, and some people are still in the exploring stage. People that are still in the exploring stage are going to do something that's big and broad that can cut and paste into whatever their decisions are later on. People that are closer to saying, this is really it, this is my area of expertise, maybe could be much more focused in on a very specific part of what they're studying. And I am happy to work with, either and in between all of those. I have taught this class for over a decade now, and so what I know about it is that it is better now than it was 15 years ago, because in those days it was 100% seminar. And when I was going through these seminar classes, we would be reading these fabulous things and having great discussions and making great products and doing all of this great stuff about achieving school excellence or whatever our topic was. And we'd have these questions called, and how does that fit in with what we're going to do for our dissertation? And the answer always was, you'll get to that later. You'll get to that later. Well, we did get to that later, and we did learn good writing tools and things along the way. But what the change has been in the last 10 years is we are now making it very, very intentional about putting the assignments that we're doing so that if you choose to, it can go specifically with what it is that you're expected to do for a dissertation type of study. I have to make sure my sound is off here. One night I let it run forever and ever, and it was very irritating. All right, double check and make sure that's off. So we've now moved so that the seminars and the research classes, when you look at the list, it actually talks about what part of the dissertation is being covered by that class. Now, the good thing that's happened because of that is people are graduating 12 months to 18 months earlier than the average did back in the day. Because if in this class you're studying in that area of expertise of what it is you're thinking that you want to be the expert in and that you're going to be writing your dissertation on, then you're building that pile of stuff that's sitting over in the corner of your desk or on your dining room table, and then pretty soon it'll start to overflow. I'm sorry to tell you, but if it hasn't started to overflow, whatever your original idea of how you're going to put this all together, it soon will. If you have all those things done, and if in these classes you continue to write in your area of expertise, you don't have to say, I don't know exactly what the study's going to be. That's okay. Remember, this is all just gravy. This is all stuff that we're doing before the 12 hours of dissertation. That's part of these classes. So if you want to just think of stuff in here as a paper for this class, fine. It doesn't have to be the dissertation. In fact, I had a student 2 years ago who would continually turn in assignments to me saying, chapter 2 of my dissertation. And I'm like, you don't have a dissertation yet. You can't have a chapter 2. Now, will it possibly fold in and be part of your chapter 2 later on? Yes. But if you're only focused on so much on how am I going to make this thing be part of my dissertation, you're going to miss some of the joy of the journey, and you're also going to get yourself extra stressed in that we've got this kind of parceled out for you. And if you're trying to jump ahead and I sit down every semester and have this talk with 1 or 2 DOT candidates saying, you don't have to write your whole dissertation in one semester. Because they're trying to get it all, and I know, I can't possibly read enough, I can't do all of that. That's not our point here. Our point here is to give you more of a ground in this stuff so that when you get time and you say, okay, here's my dissertation chair, and you're sitting across the table from that person, you also are sitting with a stack of some stuff that you can use to put together like a jigsaw puzzle and see where the pieces are missing and finish it up, rather than starting with, well, what should my topic be? So that's a long explanation, but it's a philosophy that, if you understand, it keeps you from having too much concern why we're pushing this so early. We are grappling with stuff early. Sometimes people are saying, this is my first class, how do I I'm like, if you start to think about it in your first class, then you don't say, gee, after my 4th class, I wish I'd been writing about something in this area along the way. I'd be so much farther. My friends that kind of channeled things their way through are graduating a year faster than I am. So, I'm going to talk more about it, but let's talk specifics about what this seminar is about. This seminar is Achieving School Excellence. It has morphed through several names throughout time. And you can see that it's such a big umbrella that really anybody's area of expertise fits under that. I mean, you can't, I've never had anybody come to me and say, you know what I'm really interested is, and that doesn't contribute to achieving excellence in education in some manner. And so we will be using your expertise to make this seminar be unique. I told you I've taught it for a decade. I have never taught the same one twice because it is your voices and your expertise and the interplay. You're saying, look what I read. Oh, really? That fits with what? And it's never the same that it's ever been before because you haven't been here before. It does have some commonalities to it. One of the commonalities that I use is a textbook. And I do require you have the textbook, and your group will probably require you to bring the textbook to help them out at times. And you can see the chapters of the textbook match up with the topics of the calendar. So that chapter 1, depth, is also week 3's topic of the night. I chose Hargreaves and Fink's book not because it's inexpensive, although it is, which was a nice bonus, but I used it back when it was brand new and more expensive. And I kept using cutting edge books, but I came returning to this one because it has enough detail and yet it's broad enough that within one chapter talking about depth, one group will be talking about assessment, another one will talk about brain-based research, another one's going to be talking about instructional practices, and yet all of those things fit together in creating the depth of instruction and getting education to be a deeper, meaningful type of enterprise. So, if you haven't got Hargreaves and Fink yet, there should be used copies. I've used it several times in the past. There should be used copies out among the candidates. There should be some in the bookstore. There should be on all of those different sites and places where you can go and get a book. You don't need it this week and you don't need it next week. But the week after that, we're going to be using that as our jumping off point or as our way of keeping these, very different topics to have some kind of commonality, some kind of theme of what's going with them. So that book's there. Now you also see at the bottom there's a writing lit review book. That's not required. In fact, that's not the be-all, end-all of them. But what I want to remind you is, as you're learning to do different parts of the research, there are stacks and shelves over in Chris' library that are on those topics. When I decided for my dissertation that I wanted to do a survey, I went over and was just blown away. I couldn't even figure out which book I wanted on surveys because there were so many of them. They're there for a reason. They're there for a reason so that you don't have to sit at a computer and go, how do I make a good survey versus a bad survey? I don't know. All of those resources are just right over there and are available to each and every one of you. And you should have some of those when you get to the end. If you're going to be talking about doing focus groups, there's going to be some references and some citations to some of the stuff you've read about how to do a good focus group in your references at the end of your paper. So you might as well start getting those things now and taking your anxiety level down by teaching yourself the way it works for you. Because we can teach you, this is how you do a t-test, or this is how you write an introduction. But really, even within that, everybody comes at it from a little bit different place and needs it for a little bit different reason. And it's time to start discovering your strengths and seeing what that is within you. So I put that one down there because it's a pretty inexpensive one, and it is pretty straightforward. If you like sequential laid out with some nice examples, it's there and it's available for you. So it's a recommendation. It is not anything. I usually see only a couple of people who actually go out after that resource, and there's other good ones out there as well. On the back of the syllabus then, the expectations are that you will be here if at all possible. I really don't have to say that. About 5 years ago, and I'm still figuring some of this stuff out that now it seems just normal to me. I was teaching a master's class followed by a doctorate class, and the forecast was for that the weather was going to get worse and worse as the night goes along. About 10 o'clock, it was going to be pretty bad. I had people that were going to drive as far as York and Des Moines in that doctorate class. So I called people in my doctorate class and said, you know what, it's really bad. If you can't make it, don't worry about it. No foul, no harm, no nothing. You have to figure out whether the roads are good for you. Thank you, Dr. Kaiser. Immediately, my master's people, are you closing class? Are you closing classes? I'm like, what's the difference here? And so what I realized is by the time you figured out how to do a doctorate and have a life and have a job and do all of these kinds of things, a little couple inches of snow doesn't seem like a whole lot of anything. What happened that night is, yes, I had my master's class, and they sat there waiting for me to call it because the roads were going to get bad, and they weren't bad till 10 o'clock, and this was 6:30. I went upstairs to my doctorate class, had 100% attendance. I told everyone if they didn't have to come, and they were all sitting there. So I don't say that to pressure you, but just that I know you'll take care of it in some way. If you are not sitting here, you will be on this machine going, okay, what did I miss? What do I need to do? How's it going to go? You'll take care of it. You know, Kelly will pick up the stuff for Liz, and Liz will do it the same thing when Kelly has to go to a conference and so on, you know, and we'll take care of one another with it. So, while it says about, you know, letting me know, that's so that I don't worry and wonder, you know, are you wandering around the parking lot right now not finding the, you know, it just helps me to know when we're going to have people missing. So that is helpful. Otherwise, it's pretty standard expectations for a college class. So going on into the assignments. One of the things that happens is you all get so interested in talking to each other about all this great stuff that sometimes I'm left out of the conversation, and I feel a little lonely. So what I've decided to do is that each night you're going to give me some kind of feedback, so that I'm kind of knowing what it is you're learning and what you're worried about and what you're thinking and so forth. So when you have a class that's here, there is a page in your book that goes with that. So you can open it up right now and you can turn back after the first page and you can see for January 13th, here's some questions. Now, there is no big grade like whoever wrote the most gets the most points, or, you know, sometimes people look at all of these prompts and go, you know what, that's not where my mind is at all, and they write to me over here on the blank page. That's fine. Some people get so excited about one of these prompts, they spend their whole time on that and the rest of the page is blank. That's fine. There is no thing that says fill in every one of these things. It's the quality of the thought, not the quantity of the words, that I'm seeking in the feedback from you. Now, when you're having a night that you don't meet with me, and then there at the bottom of that page, and I'll show you that in just a moment, then there's a place for you to give the feedback to me through BlackBoard. So I give points with those. So you can see why there's little squares on the calendar, because I give points each night for those times, for just so that there's some accountability for having that feedback. The study group discussion leader, what that one is that in the next 4 times we meet, the 4 of you will each take a turn at being the one who decides what you're going to do that night for 30 to 45 minutes. What's the topic? Some people bring in on YouTube and show it, and then they talk about it. Some people bring in an article. Some people say, you know what, let's all bring in our books and mark 2 or 3 things that we thought was important, and that's what we're going to discuss. Whatever it is, they're the facilitator of the group for that night. And so after that night, then there's a place on the BlackBoard also that says something like discussion leader blog or something like that. There's a place for you to go in and write the big ahas of, it doesn't have to be paragraphs and paragraphs, but what happens is sometimes this group is over here having a riot and the rest of us don't know what that fun thing is they're talking about. Unless they blog about it, we are busy doing our own things and don't know. So that's a way that we can get a little synopsis that we all can learn from what each one of those groups brought to it. And so you say, oh man, Amanda really put on a really great, I wish I had that copy of that article. Well, then you can just email and say, can I have a copy of that article too, or whatever. And so that's what that is. And so that week, when you're the discussion leader in the next 4 times that we meet, then you are required to put it up onto the blog, and that is an assigned piece. So, and part of the reason I'm doing the first 4 like that is it gets you into a pattern of this is how this group works. This is what this group likes to do. The second 4 weeks, there is no, you're the leader, you're going to do it. And sometimes the groups say, okay, let's divide up and do the second. I like the first round, let's do it the round again. Other times they do it in different ways. And I'm not even going to tell you what the different ways are because they just kind of morph out of the personalities of who's involved. And after they've done 2 or 3 weeks, they say, you know what, this structure is too structured for us, let's do it this way. Okay. Now, once again, you're going to have to figure out, you could decide that Jill is going to be the blogger for your group that second 4 weeks, and that's her responsibility, is always to be the blogger. And Bernice is always going to be the facilitator, and so she will be the one that leads the group. That's perfectly fine. I'm just worried you were out there wandering around the parking lot. So
we have our accreditation visits.
Oh, that's all this week, isn't it? Yeah, I've been hearing about that. Advanced Ed's all over Bellevue this week, yes. So anyway, what you're going to do during that opening time is you're going to figure out something. It might be a book you've read. It might be a staff development that you've been a part of. It might be a topic that you're researching. It can be any of those things, but it's on the topic of the night. Now they're very, very broad. So here are the first 4. So that, because you're going to, when I'm done talking here in just about 30 seconds, you're going to say to your group, I want this night, and you're all going to choose up. The topic of depth usually has some kinds of instructional type of piece to it, whether, like I said, from brain research to assessment and everything in between. Depth usually goes in the way of instruction. Length is talking about usually strategic planning, thinking ahead, getting the next person in line for the job, or whatever those. It has something to do with thinking forward to the future. Breadth usually has a leadership role to it in some way. It's got a lot in that about shared leadership roles and transformational leadership and change. Those types of things happen with that. And the 4th one is justice, and that really is the night that has a lot of pieces with it that either go from an equity to a social justice, somewhere in there plays through that theme of those 4 nights. Now the other thing that can make people go is they're like, you know what, that's my birthday, I'm not going to be the leader that night, or I may not be here that night because so you also can look at dates, but you're going to right now decide who's group A, who's group B, who's group C, and within your group, who's going to be the facilitator, A night, B night, C night, D night, if you can see that on the calendar, and then inside your folder, would you just open it up and write down here by my card, which by the way shouldn't be here after tonight, that's so that you have it, so you can get a hold of me when you need to. But right down here by there, could you write A, B, C, or D, just for my knowledge, which one you're choosing? So I'm going to give you just a minute here to kind of think about it and talk to members of your group and kind of choose up which person's going to do which night.
I would prefer D, but I'll do B. So,
Want to take D?
We're actually,
I think, yep, like red.
Who?
Yep.
for when you build something,
It
doesn't
does.
it?
You're asking?
Well, I tend to go there.
I'll say C. Is that right?
See?
I don't think that is good. You want C? Are you okay with being C? I don't even know, I'm just guessing.
I know, yeah, maybe that would be something. Yeah.
So I put C in. So what am I? 'Cause I didn't know what I'm going here.
Okay, if you're getting struggled, just the person that's sitting closest to me right now, you become the emperor and you assign them. If they're having trouble figuring it out, or the person closest to me assign them, and the kids can always trade later on.
Yeah, we can trade if we have to.
You can always trade, so just plop them in there.
Which one do you do?
But I want people to kind of figure out tonight, so you know whether you're on in a couple weeks or whether it's way months down the road, and you know that you can kind of see where that's going to be.
How long do we have before that groups will class?
I close it about 5:15. So usually groups are really running at 4:45 and going strong. So it's usually about a half an hour. But sometimes people come early and they, so they can kind of set up and start having conversations. Questions on this part of the requirement of the class? Okay, then let's talk about that last piece, which is by far the largest piece in terms of points and grades. It isn't necessarily, especially at the beginning of the semester, what we're going to spend the most time at. But the part that's been assigned to this class is literature review. The part that's been assigned to this class is literature review. And you say, but we kind of did a literature review in culture and context. Yes. There's literature review in chapter 1 and chapter 2 and chapter 5, and I'll explain those chapters for those of you that just sounded like a bunch of numbers. And what I'm looking for is for you to do a piece of a literature review, not 800 pages of it. I had a person last year trying to do their entire literature review but you can't even possibly know what that's going to be until you're in there and doing it. But on the other hand, there's going to be some part of literature review that means something to you that you can do. What I've said to most of you in the room too many times already, I'm sorry for repeating it, but for those that didn't hear it, everything you should do in this degree should have one of two purposes. It should either enhance something that's happening in your workplace or something in your area of expertise. You really don't have time for isn't this fun or nice to know. That's what the exciting people that are kind of skipping around, that have just graduated with their doctorates, all of a sudden are reading books because they just want to, And so make it move toward one of those two things. And so if you're working on, you say, you know what, we have a new initiative at work and I need to know more about it, well, that'd be fine to step aside from the expertise area and do that on that. I had someone who all of a sudden was going to have a large influx of students who were coming from another nation and wanted to know how do you merge those cultures. And so they stepped aside and did a literature review on that, even though that wasn't going to be their area of study. Guess what happened? It eventually became their area of study too. But it doesn't have to. It will work for you either way. In the paper itself, that's what I'm going to talk to you about on those weeks when we're not meeting. Okay, that's what those in-betweening meetings are about. If you look and see on the calendar, the things that are not bold, I'm going to talk to you about how do you do a study, how do you write a literature review, where do you find good information, how do you know when you've cited enough, all those questions that I can remember that I still ask myself at times as I'm writing. I'm going to be giving you lots of resources and information and so forth with that. And so then I've also broken down the task itself into some kind of palatable steps. I mean, I even have this thing in there called the fuzzy draft. The fuzzy draft comes before the rough draft. It's the first, throw it at the wall and see if it sticks type of thing, where you're just going to write me a page and the rest of it's outline or that type of thing. It's just kind of, let's see whether I can stand to do this thing. Is this my passion and I like when I open up the laptop to work on it, or do I have to force myself to do it? If you having to force yourself to do it, you're in the wrong place, because you're going to spend a lot of hours with it, and it's got to be something that you're drawn to, not pushed away from. So those pieces come along the way, and you will start to see that next week. And how you're going to see that is, this is what our Blackboard looks like. Now, when we meet together, and you are welcome to play along, because my PowerPoint for tonight is posted. It's also posted, if you're sitting there trying to watch me on this little screen of what I'm doing here, you know, that's the camera. You know you're not seeing the PowerPoint from there. I also put the major pieces of it into your handout, so your handout has most of the slides that you want or need. If you're one that likes to write on a handout, I put it that way as well. And this is where tonight's class will be shown. Where you find that is over here. I pull out the guts of this and don't put all that course materials and stuff. I put in by week. So here's week 1, and then you should be able to see week 2. Now you look at mine. I've got them all in. I'm just not showing them to you all quite yet. We don't want to frighten anybody yet, because one piece at a time, it's not that frightening. All at once, you're amazed how much you get done in a semester. You know that from the class to class semester. Okay, so this is the hybrid. I can see it's an online class because it's got an H beside it. When I go into that, the directions are that you open up a Word document. So when I ask you to respond to me, you just keep filling it in on a Word document. At the bottom of the page, then there's a place where if you click on that, that's where you can turn it in. It asks you to upload. You can see this is worth a whole 2 points, so don't spend your whole weekend at it. Okay? But it's replacing a class, so do spend 3 hours at it. You'll make it happen. You browse your computer for that Word document, it uploads to there. It immediately goes into my pile of papers that need to be graded. I give you your lovely 2 points. You know I've got it, and we're done with that assignment. As we go through, this will continue to develop. The blogs will continue to develop as you write into them, and I will continue to add resources as we go along. So if you are uncomfortable with Blackboard, this is the time to kind of get into it. If you can do a website, and you can do an email, and you can work with Word or a word processing document, this doesn't ask you to do anything beyond those things. But you kind of have to find where the buttons are and so forth with it. So if you haven't been on it, that's how we're going to communicate with one another as we go and come through that. So that's the way the syllabus looks, and that's going to kind of play with what I'm going to talk about in the regular handout now. So you can kind of switch out of the syllabus world and into the handout that's in your folder. We're just a few minutes away from a break, but anytime anybody wants to take a break, sometimes that reminds me that I've been talking too long. So don't worry about it. Just get up and take a break, or answer that phone out in the hall, or whatever it is you need to do. The restrooms, by the way, are right here across, and there is coffee machine on one behind by room 112. It's around the corner, and then up by the doors where most of you came in. And by the way, you can't come in on 1 or on 2. But lower level does not. That's why I put it in the email. Lower level, if you come in that front door and then try to go down the stairs, you can't get here. So that's why I sent you directions on how to get here. Okay, when I saddled with the idea that I was going to do this doc seminar. By the way, in that class were people that had been in class with me the semester before, which was really interesting because I graduated on Friday and started being a professor here on Monday. You know, it was that fast of a turnaround type of thing. I thought about what is this whole thing? How does doing a lit review and people doing their own issues, and how does this all fit together into something that we can call achieving school excellence? So this is what the inside of my brain kind of looked like at that point. That there really are three things that we're going to, some nights we'll be looking a lot more at the research and some nights not so much. And some nights we'll be looking much more at the issues and other nights not so much. But really, the sweet spot in achieving school excellence is when you're able to look at the leadership and the programs that they are leading and the people the culture that they're working with and the data that they're collecting on, so that they're able to do well. I don't need that. When they all come together, we get into a sweet spot with it. So hopefully it's confusing sometimes as we go through. It's like this week we sat and we talked about brain research, and now she's talking about how to do a literature review, and now we're back and all these are like pieces to me of a picture that come together, and what you take out of it is what you need. There are people that come to this program that need a lot of writing support, and so they will be looking through that writing stuff a whole lot more than people that write as part of their job. There are other people that write a lot and do that type of research and data that want those experiences in leadership because they're trying to move themselves into a different career or move themselves farther in their career. And so the leadership pieces are the ones that are going to resonate with them. Hopefully there's some of all of them that resonate with all of us, but each one of us have an individual takeaway, I think, with a lot of this. So I wanted to talk to you a bit about leadership and what happens inside of my head when I think about it. When I got to the place of taking comps, I got to write for 2.5 hours on one question. Oh, I wrote 2 days on many questions. But 2.5 hours of them were on, without using education ease, tell what it means to be an educational leader in a time of school change. I couldn't use any of my jargon. So I said, leadership is herding cats. Being a cat lover, I still know their shortcomings, and I know that it's not hurting. It's not even hurting dogs. It's hurting cats. Within a month of me writing that, the Super Bowl came out with their ads. And
this man right here is my great-grandfather. He's the first cat herder in our family.
Herding cats. Don't let anybody tell you it's easy. Anybody can herd cattle, holding together 10,000 half-wild short-hairs. That's another thing altogether.
Being a cat herder is probably about the toughest thing I think I've ever done.
I got this one this morning, right here, and if you look at his face, they just ripped to shreds, you know.
You see the movies, you hear the stories, I'm living a dream. Not everyone can do what we do.
I wouldn't do nothing else.
It ain't an easy job, but when you bring a herd into town and you ain't lost to one of them, ain't a feeling like in the world.
The first time you see this, you get so caught up with
EDS, managing the complexities of the digital economy.
Shedding and all that kind of thing. You don't really hear the message. But when you listen to what they say, there's no job like this in the world. When you get to the end and you haven't lost to one of them, there's no feeling like that. It's a hard job. Not everybody can do it. But if it's your job, there's nothing else. There's nothing else in the world, and you love it. And so I think both of those things are true in educational leadership. I think there is all of the scratches that go on and the shedding and so forth. But on the other hand, if you don't have that underlying call, that underlying need, and that underlying love, it's hard to see past the scratches and to see what it is that you really are accomplishing. But that's what we're here. That's what we're here as a group is because we are people that care about that in our society. We could be home watching TV right now, and we're not. And it isn't because you're going to get this big, beautiful pay raise at the end of it, because that doesn't happen. If you do get a pay raise, they ask for that many more hours out of it as well, and we know that. So there's something else that's pulling us to be here and to talk to this. This semester, I use a model of The Congruent Leader by Ramon. Why does the name just went out of my head? I just was going to say it, and it just went. You look at my blog, because I talk about it. Because I put a blog up for you right away. Corrales is his name, Ramon Corrales. And he has a model of leadership that is congruent leadership, and he talks about some of these types of issues and as we talk about programs, you can't really separate the leader from the program and those types of issues that come through with them. So some people really concentrate on that. Their whole study is about. I worked with, several years ago, I worked with Dr. Jerry Beach, and his was on why are good teachers not becoming good building leaders? So he was into leadership all the way through his. Other people, not so much. They wanted to know whether the math program that is being adopted is making a difference for kids. There's still a leadership component to that, but it's not going to be on the front page. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead here because I talked too long, obviously. To introduce ourselves tonight, you guys kind of get to be a cohort. Sometimes you know each other better than I even know you at this point. And sometimes there's people in the room that don't know anyone that's in the room, and because we all kind of jump on this merry-go-round. So rather than do the regular just name ourselves and tell what we do, I'm going to ask you to do something that might add a piece to that. And I'm also going to ask Orange Group to notate that and blog eventually the list, so that if I said I read the Three Bears, somebody there. So you figure out, like, if you're going to do every other one or whatever, so that we all don't have to write down all these things. And it doesn't matter who said it; it matters what they say. Because what we're going to ask you is about something that you're reading or something that you recommend that we would read. And it can be anything from a journal article to a novel. I mean, if you want us to read Harry Potter, that's totally valid as well. But what happens when we do this is sometimes we learn more about one another, because the way you change is the people you know and what you read. So what we're reading is changing us, and we can change one another by giving some of these good ideas about what we read. So I'll start, and I'm going to give the long version, because I still remember that my first question is, who is this person and what's she about and what does she want from me? So I'm going to give you the long version. You're going to give me a name and a position and go on to the book. But I'm going to give you a little more background. My name is Kay Kaiser, and I'm a native of Nebraska, and I have 3 degrees from the University of Nebraska at Omaha. All of my degrees are from there, and somewhere in between those, for 25 years, I worked for the Omaha Public Schools. But I also was, as an Omaha Public Schools teacher, taught 6th grade and 5th grade for a whole lot of years. And I thought I had the world by the tail and I knew everything, until I stepped out, started doing some leadership positions, and realized I didn't know much. But I was doing staff development, and when I did staff development, I did it all over the region, and then became a cadre associate, was working in all of the different districts, and as a cadre associate, then I became interested in this program. When I became interested in this program, I all of a sudden started taking leadership positions within the district, and kept changing positions as I went through until I came back here and I found another home. And so my interests are dealing a lot with school culture, and also I'm moving back to my first love, which is instruction that works, I guess is the way I can say, and how that works in the mind of the leader or the teacher to move to the effective teaching. So with that being said, you're going to find out a whole lot more about me throughout this semester than you ever want to know. The last thing I'm going to tell you, though, is As I go through the class, I'm going to give you bonus lessons from beginning to end about how to do the program, because that doesn't get talked about purposefully and intentionally very often. It didn't with me at all. We'd run around and talk to each other about, well, what do you think? I don't know. And none of us would turn and talk to the faculty about it. And so we got a whole bunch of really strange misconceptions about what we were supposed to be doing and how it was supposed to work. So I'm going to intentionally go through, in fact, I'm going to go clear through graduation. The last night we'll talk about what you do and don't do for graduation and how many people you invite and all the way back. So tonight we're going to start at the beginning. At one time we'll go through comps, and toward the end of the class I will actually stand up and defend my dissertation for you so that you have a chance to see it and know what that whole process and everything looks like. So you can tell I'm pretty fearless. I was in a place where I had student teachers and people coming into my classroom as a 6th grade teacher continuously till the place where I just ignored all the rest of what's going on and just worried about the people that I cared about in there, who were the students, and I still do that today. So, you know, it's not, I'm willing to handle the uncomfortable things either privately or within the group as well, because that's how I grow, and you help me become better at what I do as well. So, again, if I were giving this as sitting there as a student, I'd say, Kate Kaiser, and I'm the chair of the Department of Educational Leadership at UNO. And the book that I'm reading right now that I really like is called The Principle, no, it's not The Principle of One. I brought it along because I knew I'd forget right along about now. I have a pile of 3 books laid somewhere. The One Thing, that's what it's called. It's called The One Thing. It's by Gary Keller. And I was drawn to it because it really does the Pareto principle, but it's like, how do you focus and what's the myth of multitasking? It's got a whole lot of really interesting things from my life as well as from what I do professionally as well. So The One Thing is my book. So maybe we're going to just go around this way and just tell us who we are.
Expect me to follow you?
I expect you to set the bar so the rest of them feel comfortable. So if you think that's really high, well, but they're all going to be angry with you. So don't.
All right. Well, then in that case, I'll set them up.
That's fine. Just set it comfortable.
We know a lot of you know me. I'm Nick Baum, assistant principal at Elkhorn St. Patrick's Elementary Middle School. I have 2 degrees from University. Nebraska, Lincoln, and now working on this one at UNO. I'm not from here, from a farm in southern Nebraska, and came to Omaha to where there's more jobs and more people. My first jobs were on very small western schools, and decided to move forward to a bigger place. A lot of you probably know I talk a lot about wellness, so I'd say the thing that I just recently read about was a journal article that had to do with breakfast. Somebody's heard that before from me. Breakfast and where it's located in a school and how important it is to our kids this day and age. And you're going to ask me what it is, and I'm going to tell you in a little bit because I can't remember.
That's okay. You can stick it on the website
I'll do
one
that.
of these days.
But it talks about breakfast and where it's located in a school, and if you even have a breakfast program. A lot of private schools don't have breakfast. It's really important to our kids behaviorally and just attendance and tardies. So I think it's something you should look at. A lot of people worry about, how we're testing them and what we're doing with them and making them comfortable in that way, but we forget some of the simple things like how they come to school to us and if they're ready to learn. And that's, I'm crabby at like 8 if I don't eat, so you can't imagine what they feel like.
Or all the time.
I'm crabby all the time? Oh. I'm trying to be crabby all the time. But anyways.
Thank you.
I said it low. So
I'm Amanda Steiner. I'm an instructional coach here at UNO. Before coming to UNO, I was an elementary teacher. I taught private Montessori for 2nd and 3rd grade combo room. The book that I'm reading right now is called Influencer, Power of Change, and it's by Carrie Patterson.
I am Emily Brosnan. I am a dean of students at Burke High School. The book that I'm currently reading is There Are No Children Here. It's about 2 brothers who grow up in projects in Chicago on a different paths they happen to take.
I'm Sharon Genoways, and I'm a science teacher and head of the science department at Marion High School. And we were just in the process of trying to find a book for our all-school read for next year, so my books are not highly intellectual, they're more pleasure for high school girls. So I just finished reading Eleanor and Park by Rainbow Rowell, which has a lot of good messages about bullying and accepting others and differences. So. Thank you.
Terry Bolton, I'm the Director of Special Education for Miller Public Schools. Before that, I spent some time as an elementary principal, about 8 years. The book I should have been reading is called Multipliers, our administrative community reading Multipliers. Over break, I read Jim Collins's Good to Great and Great by Choice again, and two of my favorites, and I've tried to read them repeatedly.
Thank you. I'm Becky Myers. I'm an elementary principal in Papillion, Nebraska. I'm reading several books right now, and the ones I'll tell you about are, I can't remember the exact name. It's something like The Principal by Fulton, and then also that's our principal study group, and then at our school we are doing a whole Marzano piece, and so we're doing art and science and teaching and the reflective teaching.
We're doing Fulton, we should look at his motion leadership. It's a real quick, little read, but it really plays well with what you're doing in a bigger, broader sense.
I'm Andrea Yeager-Duzla, and I'm new to the Omaha area as well. Came from Kansas City, taught there for 11 years, and was a charter school teacher and administrator. Over break, I read Unbroken, the story of Louise Zamperini. Absolutely fantastic. I also read Nudge by Thayer. It's a leadership book. He's an economics professor out of University of Chicago, and he talks about how leaders, rather than setting out mandates, can do little tiny things to nudge people to do things. Governments as well have taken his, UK has taken his work, and they're setting up their retirement system through his philosophy. It's incredible. And then I'm also, since I just finished that, I just started last night, this book called The Drunkard's Walk. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's a story about, it's how randomness affects our lives. So it's kind of a statistics book. So for those of you who know me, I'm a little bit of a geek like that. But it's not a statistics book. It's how we think that things are random when they're really not, that there really is a method, and there are patterns, and when we are aware of the patterns, we make better choices.
My name is Ashley Rasmussen. I teach chemistry and AP chemistry at Elkhorn High School. The book that I'm actually just about ready to finish reading is called 10% Happier. It was written by Dan Harris. He's an anchor on Good Morning America, if you're a Good Morning America junkie in the summertime like I am. He actually usually does the weekend edition of Good Morning America. He was the correspondent who had the anxiety attack on air. Do you remember that? It's been quite a few years ago now, and he actually broke down on the air and froze up. The book was about his kind of journey to overcome his ambition and his goal setting, kind of his inner struggle with his need for perfection, with his need for happiness and satisfaction in his life. And it's been really interesting, and I think everyone in this room, because obviously we're ambitious people, it's really about learning to be satisfied and happy in the moment and not allowing all of those things that you need to do and want to do and have to do to kind of overcome you and overwhelm you. It's been really, really an interesting read. I've enjoyed it.
Hi, I'm Liz Westling, and I teach in Bellevue West in the math department. So I teach their stats classes and some of their Algebra 2 classes. And forget my lateness, that was really rude that I interrupted class. I just recently became a co-chair for our Advanced Ed Accreditation team, and so our visitors wanted to talk with all of us at the end of the day. They said they'd be done by 4:45, so I was like, cool beans, I can make it. And then it was like 4:25. I'm like, oh, sneak out. So I apologize. As far as things I'm reading, when you mentioned the stats book, I thought of Outliers, which was a book, and I had to quickly look up the author. The Story of Success, Malcolm Gladwell. You'd also could blink if you read that book, but they're fascinating books, and I couldn't put it down until I was done with it. And now I'm reading Time is of the Essence, Learning in Schools. It's because I'm focused really on time and how much time do you need to accomplish that highly engaged learner and active learning and all. That's become like my passion right now. So I'm reading lots about that.
My name's Kelly Johnson, and I'm an instructional coach here. I was a former secondary math teacher. Right now, I read a lot of Disney princess books at night. But on top of that, please don't mark that down. Don't talk about that. Thank you. But I have actually just been reading a ton of articles about coaching and teacher preparation, and the theme is always Darwin. So she just keeps coming up everywhere. So. What?
It's giving you a message when the author keeps coming back around.
Yeah.
In a lit review, it's time to stop.
Right.
Because you're getting the same information. It's time to go into a different angle or something. So it might be time to say, okay, let's look at another format or another piece of that. Because if it doesn't, people are like, I don't know how big and how I would when to stop. And when you keep seeing that same person, you're like, okay, they're all telling me the same message. I'm good. Move a little bit to another piece of it.
Thank you.
I'm Janisha Harris, and I am the instructional facilitator and the school support liaison at Masters Elementary and PS. And it's been interesting. They keep promising me I'll have one job next year. I don't know if that's true, but doing the dual role this year has been, I've learned a lot, so I'm really excited about that. One thing that I'm reading right now is Creating the Opportunity. Opportunities and the way our school system is structured. Sometimes we're inadvertently taking opportunities away from students, so really looking at that, so we're making sure that's not happening.
My name is Jill Bruckner. I'm at ESU3. We're in the Professional Development Department. I'm also, outside of that, a working journalist. So this past week I read, finally, if you haven't already read it, LB 359, which had a lot of changes and came up in the legislature, and then I had to write about that, and then also I was covering a piece on youth emergency services. So if you don't know what they're doing and you're not referring kids to them, then you need to do. Big-hearted people there. I'm right now reading the last lecture because years ago when it came out, I didn't read it. I thought it would be so melancholy, and it did seem like a downer, Also, I'm a humor columnist, so, ironically, reading a book about dying, uplifting fare, but it very much is. So if you haven't read it, I would recommend that you pick it up. It's a very slim read. It's a non-academic book written by a Carnegie Mellon academician. This winter, if you feel blue, read Stella Luna, because if you haven't, find it somewhere, just pick it up. It's a beautiful little story.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Tammy Chong, and I am the administrator at Cornerstone Christian School, which is a K-12 private school in Bellevue, and I do have 2 campuses, so I get up between the 2. I think just with having Christmas holiday and it's kind of sitting in there kind of fresh, I think we all took a little bit of time to read something that's been on a nightstand for months and everything. But I was given a book over Christmas holiday called Draw the Circle by Mark Batterson. And it is really, it's a 40-day prayer challenge of, really focusing in and certainly looking at the new year.
I'm Meredith Mills. I'm the lead teacher at Betts Elementary in Bellevue. We've been really doing a big initiative on trying to improve student engagement in our classrooms, and so I've been toggling between the Chris Biffle's whole brain teaching technique.
Do it tonight.
You're going to.
I am.
Excellent. Then we can go back and forth and do it together. And then also, we did a book study on total participation techniques, which I think is Himmel and Himmel. But basically, those two together really help to get quick and easy ways to get your students' attention, but also keeping their attention throughout the lesson. We still have a lot of lecture going on in our classrooms, and so trying to switch it up between just giving kids actively engage in their learning so that they can be successful.
I'm Farrah Pearson. I'm an instructional coach here at UNO, and before that, I taught at Omaha High School and also high school at the Avenue Scholars Foundation. Here, I just finished Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. Good. But what I'm reading now is Paul Gorski's Reaching and Teaching Students on Poverty, Strategies for Erasing the Opportunity Gap. And I'm really enjoying it because most of the books that I've read about students in poverty have this kind of deficit ideology that puts down upon people living in poverty, and they don't take into account the differences in types of poverty and all that kind of stuff. But he not only looks at that within the context of politics and how students are living, and that it's about an opportunity gap, not an achievement gap, but he also offers real-life, practical, classroom-tested strategies that you can use in the classroom to make sure that students can succeed and do well as much as possible. So, and I've been following them on Facebook too.
Probably following you too.
Yeah.
Probably watched your TikTok.
I'm Heather Baker. Currently, I am a English teacher at West High School. I just picked up Outliers last night. I started reading it, so I'm glad you guys gave me recommendations. But I'm also reading up on the Gallup strengths recently in the students.
I'm Patty Drews. I'm a speech language pathologist and early childhood in Melissa. Right now, I am rereading In the Face of Poverty. I can't remember who wrote it. And a lot of Jody Farr's work, Bridges Out of Poverty and those types of things. Teaching a class this semester in undergrad. So I'm trying to get them to be more aware of the different cultures and climates of the families that they're going to be working with, their teachers. And so I'm using some of Jody Farr's tools and hoping to become a little bit more aware of not everybody's a cookie cutter middle class family.
Principal Coxon and coordinator for experiences. I'm kind of like Kelly mentioned. I've got like multiple articles and things that I'm reading right now, and I'm thinking of the books on my desk, and I can't remember the title of them. But then I remembered one of them's right here. So, Children's Inquiry by Judith Lindquist, and so she just goes into that and redevelopment.
I'm Kelly Means. I'm a business marketing technology department chair. Well, that's my official title at Omaha Central, and then they do duties as assigned. I would recommend several celebrity autobiographies, but I'm not going to get into which ones I've read. That's what we read for our so-called book club, where we never really talk about the books, but it's an excuse to go out to dinner. Then the book that I would recommend is called Shifting the Monkey. It's from Todd Whitaker. So when you're talking about leadership and different leadership roles, and that was something that our leadership team read, and kind of puts me in perspective.
I'm Josh Jesselin. I'm the grant specialist in the College of Ed. I gotta be honest, I haven't been reading any books because I've been on vacation. But I am excited to get into this new book. I've heard a lot of good things about it, and I'd highly recommend it to everyone.
Well, that's a novel, of course, a novel right here. That's not that one. That's I think that's kind of a nice ending to what we're going to do, because we are going to read that. Let's come back together about 6 minutes.
Sorry guys, I get hangry, so
Oh, I know.
I will always have to because otherwise I'll turn into a bear.
Well, hey, I should tell you, I had one team last year that they traded off bringing the Jimmy Johns, and they're all black for the whole program, you know. So they when they came in, whoever was came in, had supper and nice. You don't have to do that. I'm just saying.
That's right. Enough to share.
Yes. Yes. I'll have to remember that.
In time for stats.
Yeah, what time is that?
7:15.
7:15.
Yeah. I won't run around up to stats.
I've only
this night will be about as long as any of
So you're like Dr. Smith? He's like,
No, I'm
I know
nothing.
Oh, okay. He's like, I don't know
I
enough
can't
to
be
sit here
that
for
nice.
3 hours and do. Oh, he can be that nice. Yeah, he is nice.
Oh, it's actually my car. It was just talking about the thing.
You found her place.
Yes.
Oh, really?
You did?
That's been new since they're in our class. Who is it? Or maybe you can't tell us who.
I can tell you, Dr.
What's that?
Elliot Osler from Teacher Education is moving over into this.
So now it's their problem to find somebody new?
Well, they're realigning some things as well, as they're moving forward. And it's just a good place for him in his career and for them in their programming. It's a real win.
Ellie and I went to the same high school. In Fort Calhoun, yes.
Well, guess what?
There you go.
But he understands.
So is this Dr.
Absolutely.
You're like,
Yeah, he told me. I mean, isn't Dr. Smith teaching in the summer somewhere?
Yes, he is teaching for the summer. But not in the doctorate program.
Oh, he's not?
You're right, that's what you
Oh, okay.
I had that one, and I just remembered it today.
We still have open surgeries.
Oh, man.
I'm
You're still looking?
working definitely open surgeries because Dr. Hill, Dr. Phil, and Dr. Smith are all
Dr. who?
Dr. Hill, Dr. Hayes, and Dr. Smith.
Dr. Hayes?
Yeah, well, but the other thing that's happened with General News is that all of the university system has a range of buyout.
Oh.
So that there's that early retirement incentive. So somebody that might have gone a few years down the road, like, okay.
Yeah. That's new, yeah. Yeah.
So,
And she got married. So,
She did.
yeah. So she didn't. She was retired. So her, and I don't know the Dr. Hill. I've never had him or her.
He teaches mostly intro to research classes.
Yes, I got married last summer.
Maybe.
And I'm like, yeah, maybe this is kind of funny. So.
Yeah, well, did you need anything?
I'm just,
She has taken the classes you're talking about. She's covered that during Oh, so that would be an interesting conversation to have because she's did like the Friday nights.
I watched last night.
Like 4 Saturdays. What have you been watching?
Yeah.
What have you been on?
That one was
Yeah.
Just had a little party. So kind of funny.
I wish you could come.
It's gonna be. I mean,
Second week of February.
Yeah.
Second week of February.
My mother was a special ed director in the last 3 years.
No, it's about this week. I know all of OPS is that week for accreditation. You're on the external team.
I know, like,
Our team doesn't like got together and we actually left campus. There's like 8 of us that were like, don't call us, we're not here. We keep our best to just like knock everything out.
Right now,
You should call this one.
That is awesome. Everybody will get told that
No way we're going through all this.
You only get to, we leave our notes packet in our folder. You can give us.
Do we leave this in the note?
Yep, you got it in the
So
folder.
just take this and leave this.
Yep, that's yours. That's what the folder usually is.
Besides
And
this.
you just delete anything that I do.
So you're glad Ohio State, did you watch for most?
I watched some of that, and I had to help my daughter with the homework, so we had to just pause it now, so if I can focus.
Well, we all pause it now and you take it.
Yeah, it's good.
Cool. What's your daughter doing?
She goes to St. James.
Keep it up.
You know, if you were down to St. Mary, I would totally do it.
I just think St. James is Principal, she's awesome.
The only reason she went there wasn't like any free affiliation or anything like that, but when
So
she
if you
was
look at my Venn diagram,
Fort Calhoun, which is where we still had half.
so my first circle was leadership and my second one was program. I'm only going to touch on program a bit.
Awesome. St.
Because
James.
that's your job to bring all of your interests to populate that. But I had a couple of things to bring to the group as we first think about that we're starting on this journey together and looking at where all of our issues interplay with one another and how those things work together to create school excellence. And one of the phrases that come to my mind as I advise people through this is, what is the question behind the question? Now, there's a great little book on self-actualization that actually is called The Question Behind the Question. And it really is meant on getting you to eliminate blame, complaining, and procrastination. And boy, wouldn't that be nice if we could possibly do that in our cultures. But it's the question behind the question. In the book, they talk about the questions are like, why won't anybody do anything? Well, that's what the question behind that is, what can I do? You know, those types of things. And so that's the question behind the question in their little world of book. But in my world of working with people with their area of expertise, very often I have to ask people the question, what do you really want to know? And you hear me say that a lot because I'm looking for the question behind the question. Very often I'll have somebody say, we got this new program and I want to find out how it works. Okay, why? What's the question behind that? Do you want to know if economically that's the right thing to do? Do you want to know if this is doing the right thing for preparing the students for the next? Do you want to know if it's the most efficient? What's the question behind that? Because just doing a study to find out whether this thing works probably doesn't need the level of writing a book about it, which is what a dissertation is a whole book on it. So it's usually something farther behind. When you read my blog rant tonight or tomorrow, whenever you read that, you're going to read that I don't buy No Child Left Behind as the answer to any question. Why are you doing whatever? That's outside of the very narrow focus of assessment. You say, oh yes, we're doing all of this stuff because of that. I'm like, really? Really? That's what we're doing everything for? You mean if No Child Left Behind was repealed tomorrow, you wouldn't do any of those things? Any of them? You would just, oh, well, I guess we don't need early childhood anymore because there's no child left behind and it's gone. You know, and so I challenge you as you're starting to think about what that area of expertise is to look at the deeper whys. And what the question is that's hiding behind that question that you pose. Because very often the interesting question is that one that's in the background, that's the real deep one, that's harder to answer than that surface one is. But that's the one that makes the difference for the students and for the culture and for the future as well. So that third piece of the Venn diagram was research, and we're going to be looking at, I'm going to pretend you don't know anything about it. Some of you will go through some of this stuff next week really fast because you do a lot of that. And when you say qualitative research, you're like, I do that for a living, I know this. I don't need to be told what the 4 kinds of qualitative research are. And other people are like, when I went through the program, we all sat in our DAC classes and went, and we had no clue, and we weren't going to tell anybody that we had no clue. And sometimes we would go out in the parking lot and go, did you understand what he said? I know, I didn't get that. No. And nobody raised their hand and said, hey, I'm not quite sure what that is. So that we don't have Swiss cheese, I'm going to go through pretty basic. I don't mean to talk down to anyone at any point. Speed through the parts that you already got and you already know. But I don't want to leave any child behind. So we're going to talk about my role in the research piece here is to help you become more systematic in how you're going to approach all of these things. That it isn't some random thing that you're going to go after for, this magical thing called your dissertation at the end. That there's some systems that you create. Whether that system is how you keep track of the citations that you're making, whether the systems are how do I choose what I'm going to read in the library. I mean, you can even have a system on figuring out which titles on that list of journals, which ones you're going to read out of that journal. You can just not randomly, be drawn to some things, but you can have some criteria to figure out what those things are. Also going to be pushing for rigorous. Very often when I start to work with people at this level, they have a real comfort level with research-based things like ed and leadership, CAPN, those types of things, and they use that as their research base, and that's fine for part of it, but there's also got to be some places where you're going into the qualitative and quantitative literature and saying, what are the other people that are studying this in a rigorous manner saying about this? And we'll be talking to Melissa Cass, Greedy, and so forth, and get some support from what the university can do for you for your research as well. So tonight's goal is to talk about being a critical reader. There's a couple of articles that are in your handout that I will be using as a jumping off place for the next segment of what we're going to do next week. And if I said to you, and I did say to you in the announcements, read those articles, I know what 95% of us would do. They'd start with word 1, and they would read this thing through until they got to word 1,000 or whatever it is. Never is a question along the line, like on the second page, should I quit? Is this making my... No, the teacher told me to read this on everything all the way through. Every word of it's just as important as every other word. That's the way we were taught. Every word of our math book was just as important as every word of the library book that we checked out. And yet those things are not all equal. And we don't have time to read every word of every journal of every, So how do we make that happen? Well, one is to be critical. And not critical in the way like, well, this is trash. But critical means some other things. It means that you have a skepticism. It is shocking to me, and it shouldn't be, but it still does, when people just accept the stuff that I say. I got my degree here, people. I didn't get it from, Harvard Law College or something like that. I don't have all of the answers of things. I expect people to be skeptical. I don't expect them to be rude, but I expect them to think about, does that work for me? Does that work in my instance? Does my experience line up with that? I expect that. That's an expectation of this level of education. Now, we drum that out of kids by about second grade, that we color inside the lines. And we don't ask why the leprechaun has a green hat, even though no one's ever seen one. And wouldn't the purple-hatted leprechaun be okay? That kind of thing is drummed out of us. But But a healthy dose of skepticism is going to be helpful because everybody that writes anything, no matter how scientific it's supposed to be, has a bias and a reason, or they wouldn't have spent their life or their time or their hours or their words doing it. They have a position they're trying to sell for the best reasons in the world because they think it's good. But everybody has a position, so we need to be somewhat skeptical. We also need to look at the quality of things. Another thing that surprises me is people, I say, oh, go out and bring me in 5 journal articles, and the number of people that do a Google search for that. Well, that's okay, but that's the laundry basket, that's the unsorted laundry basket way of doing things. At least people, if you're going to use Google at this level, use Google Scholar. Okay? I mean, when you Google search it, it immediately will tell you some scholarly things that they're right toward the top together. Go to the scholarly stuff and get some stuff that has a journal. A peer-reviewed journal is not necessary but helpful because that means someone else in the field has read it and agrees with what the author is saying before the editor just publishes it. So question the quality. I mean, the stuff that was written as absolute facts, changes. But the quality of what's being written has grown because the quantity of it has just exploded too. I think back about people that wrote dissertations in 1920. Oh my gosh, how hard could that be? Well, in some ways it was a lot easier because there were only so many books in the card catalog that you could go to, and there was only so many things, and now there's so much that it's just can be overwhelming what those things are, and we have to be the one who figures out what the quality is, and scrutinizing the claims, like why are they saying that this works or doesn't work. Everybody isn't selling soap to us, but on the other hand, a lot of times you have got to go back and read the original. So you're reading along in a journal article and you love this quote by so-and-so. And you say, oh, I'm going to quote that too because that fits in what I'm saying. And you go back and you look at the original article and you're like, I don't believe what that person doesn't have the know-how or the case that they're building doesn't make sense. I can't use that quote because I can't stand on that kind of shoddy work. So what I'm asking you to do is to look at things with a critical eye. As you look at these things, it's really not being negative. It's constructive. But everything isn't equal. Even the 2 articles I have for you to read for next week. Some people will read all of them thoroughly because they just love that kind of stuff. Some will read one of them because it resonates with them or matters to what it is that they do in their job or their expertise. And some of them will read the other one for just the same exact reason. And some people will read neither one of them because, well, they'll read it, but they won't read it deeply. Really devour it. Because they look at the quality of it and go, you know what, that doesn't really excite me about anything that I'm doing in my work or my life. So I'm going to step aside at this moment because I've been lecturing long enough. And I'm going to do some whole brain teaching. Other people in the room like it too, so I'm excited about it. And before I get too heavy into the jargon, I want to talk about the 5 parts of educational research, which has nothing to do with the 5 points that are listed down here. I want to talk about the 5 parts of a dissertation. Because I throw around things like problem statements and proposals and all those kinds of things, and so do you, and then you think you kind of, it's like you kind of bump around in the night and hopefully you get close to what that really means. We're going to do it in an intentional way. I'm going to do this with whole brain teaching because until you experience it, you don't really know how that would work for that little first-year teacher that's having those classroom management issues, or that third-year teacher who's kind of in a rut, or that's next staff development that you want to say, how can we have a focus lesson that in a short period of time can get something taught that everybody needs to know. Because this isn't differentiated stuff. This is like everybody needs to know this. Well, guess what? Everybody in this room needs to know when we say Chapter 4, we all need to have the same view of what that is. We need to understand what that thing is. So, for those of you that are note takers. I put dots there, but really whole brain teaching has nothing to do, and when I do it with first year teachers and those types of people, I make them put their pencils away, say, okay, we're gonna learn in a different channel for this little space of time, and then you can pick up what you learned afterwards and write that. You can write a summary later on. But for right now, put your pencils down. So you can write if you want to, if that's the way you do it. But I want to talk to you about the essence of whole brain teaching, and then you're going to teach it to one another. Every one of you. Because that's part of what's going on. So, we're doing whole brain teaching with students, whether they're tired people that have worked all day, or whether they're little kids that can't sit very long, or whatever that is. We're doing it to raise the energy level in a positive way. Now, I just made a purposeful gesture. You can see me wave my arms all night long doing this kind of stuff. When I'm doing whole brain teaching, I make purposeful gestures like raising the energy level, and I expect the people in the room, if they don't, I stop and go, raising the energy level, because I expect to see hands in the room going, thank you, there we go. And by the way, in whole brain teaching, there's a whole way of that you get the group going, that you keep a scoreboard, and everybody cheers and everybody groans, and we all get going, and we get really excited about it. I teach graduate students, they sit in their chairs by themselves, okay. But you can see I put some artificial energy in what I've been doing from what I just was talking about. I'm just kind of pulling myself up and getting a little excited about it. 5 parts of a dissertation is dead. Okay. So, you get energized, and when you're teaching, you also become energized. So the first thing we're going to remember is we need to get our energy level up. And the second thing we're going to remember is that we make purposeful gestures. And we do it in very short spaces of time. So I've talked enough. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to teach the calls and responses with this. And the first one is, when I'm ready for you to teach, you're going to turn to that person next to you, and you're going to say, okay to me, and then turn to them and teach what you've just been taught. You will know when to stop when I say class. When I say class, you're going to turn back to me and say, okay, so I've taught you several things now. I've taught you why we would do whole brain teaching. I've taught you about getting your energy up and using purposeful gestures. I've taught you that you need to do it in short bursts of time. And I've taught you the teach okay and the class yes. So I would never do this fast with second graders, but I'm not teaching second graders. So let's see how we do this. So you're going to turn to your person next to you. When I say teach, you say okay. All right, do it. Oh, you gotta go. I'm gonna be go. Class. Okay. You turn back to me. You never give people enough time because you took a long time getting into that activity. And you know now when I'm whole brain teaching, you got to jump in because I'm going to stop you before you're done, and you got to go. So, knowing the class okay and the teacher, the teach okay, the class yes. You can see how you can help start with management. In, out, let's go, stop, together, work with one another. Another thing that you can do is during the time when people are doing, you do switch. Okay? So when we do switch, the first time, when I first start to talk, the person that's sitting closest to this wall is going to tell the person that's sitting next to them a reason why they might want to know about whole brain teaching or learning in their environment. What's a reason that you might want to know about it, knowing that any moment I may yell out switch, and when I yell out switch, the roles change. The person that was eagerly giving information is now going to be the eager receiver or learner. And your role when you're an eager learner is to ask good questions, to paraphrase and to repeat back the important parts so that they know that they were done. So I'm going to say teach, person closest to the wall on this wall is going to start talking about a reason why you want to do whole brain learning or whole brain teaching. Teach. Okay. Switch. Class.
Yes.
All right, thank you. The responses are not normal with you, and you're doing really well at bringing those back so that we can keep going with this. The content's important, though. I mean, just teaching people yes, no, up, down, using gestures, those types of things. If there isn't anything to learn during that part, it does. You might as well do jumping jacks. You did more for your cardio than what we've been doing. So it's the content that's important. And so one of the things, if you're teaching this to faculty, to staff, to new teachers, to pre-service teachers, they've got to think of the what that would fit within that because everything wouldn't work with this. The people that do it all day long, it's gaggy. But there's certain things that work for it. So I thought particularly about now, I'm going to switch out of the how and what the whole brain teaching part is, and I'm going to just do it by teaching you the 5 parts of the dissertation. The 5 parts of the dissertation. Okay? In the 5 parts of the dissertation, no matter whether it's qualitative or quantitative, the first chapter is the introduction, like the letter I, introduction. The introduction tells me I'm going to take my finger and go like this to play a question. Why do we need to know about this thing? Because guess what? Just like any other book, if you start reading the first few pages and there's no reason to read the rest of it, you drop it. It goes back on that nightstand you were talking about. So, first chapter is going to tell us why this thing is important, and it's also going to give us, go back to I, it's going to give us information. Come on, don't be writing it down. You're going to learn this, and you can write it down later. Okay? It's going to give us information like what are the important words, what are the research questions, what are the limitations of what's going on. So chapter 1 is introduction. It tells us why we're doing it and gives us information. Chapter 2. I made this now. I know people got. Let's see if anybody does it. Nobody's done it. Oh, there they went. Because you see, those things matter. They mean something to us. You will remember. I knew the whole brain learning mattered when a superintendent came up to me a year after class and said, "I need some help," and he did this. And I'm like, "Whoa!" He's a superintendent, and I taught him this. But that's how he remembered, because this is chapter 2, 2 fingers, chapter 2 is L for literature. This is your literature review. And there are 2 things, your fingers are pointing in 2 ways for 2 reasons. One is, it's pointing back to me like this. I want to tell in the literature review that I am the expert. And then I'm pointing to say, I want to also tell you what everybody else is doing in this field and where my information fits in with it. Okay, so now you know about chapter 1, introduction, why we do it. You know about chapter 2 and its literature review and what the purpose of those 2 things are. See if you can remember to teach that to each other. Teach. Okay.
Yeah, the introduction answers the question. Information. Chapter 2 is the literature review. It has to do with what's written. Yeah. Right. Everybody else's.
Class. Yes. There's a 3rd chapter that's very important that's coming after that. Again, we're going to have 3 fingers, but this time we're going to make them into an M. They're going to be an M for methodology. Chapter 3 is your methodology. It's how you're going to tell us how you're going to do the study. And your methodology has 3 parts to it. 3 parts. 3 fingers, 3 parts. One of the parts is you're going to tell us who. Who is this about? Who are we studying? Are we doing all 3rd graders in the school district? Are we doing teachers that have 5 years or less of teaching? Who are these people? Why did you choose them? So forth. The second piece is the what. What am I going to do? Am I going to give them a survey? Am I going to measure how fast they can walk? What am I going to do? So it's the method. It's the design of what it is you're going to do. And the 3rd thing is, how am I going to measure that thing? Is it going to be, so then you really go into the instrument itself. Do I have a valid survey? Did I ask experts to review my literature, my methodology to see that worked? What are those things are? So those are the 3 parts of there's There's the who, which is the people or the subjects, and then there's the what. So that's like a design. What are we going to do? And the third part is the instrument. How are we actually going to measure that thing? Okay. Those three things come together. Okay. Chapter 1, Chapter 2, and Chapter 3 are going to come together for the proposal. And I'm making this. I'm not going to get down on my knees to propose to you, but you're going to get down on your knees and propose to your committee at that point. And you are going to pray that your committee says it's all ready and to go. Not only do you propose to your committee, you propose to the IRB that says, yes, you have an institutional review that says you can do that, and you propose it to your school district or whoever, if you're going to be interviewing teachers, you got to have your school district, you got to have the superintendent or the research department or somebody saying yes. So, Chapters 1, 2, and 3 are the proposal, and you actually stand on your feet to the committee and get that approval. And I'll show you one later on that somebody named me did earlier, but not tonight. Okay? So now, teach each other methodology and proposal. Teach.
Okay.
Okay.
That's right. Come on, get the energy Okay. Now, standing on this side of the room, if you're out in the student side and doing this, and thank you for playing along. I know it's kind of, it can seem kind of elementary at times, but on the other hand, that superintendent that came back a year later, I'm like, yeah, this is working. It was good. Standing on the other side, there's a couple things to know. One is all those gestures not only help the people remember that, but I could tell the minute that group back there got to this part because I all of a sudden I said, oh, I'm ready. I didn't have to run around and listen to what everybody was saying. I could see from faces whether people were engaging and where they were with the material that's going on. We only have one more part, and so if you hate it, we're going to almost be done. Here we go. Chapter 4. I look at Chapter 4 as a graph. Can you see my bar graph with my pinky coming in last? Okay, there's my graph because Chapter 4 is my results. Now, if you have one that's doing statistical stuff, you do put tables and graphs and that kind of stuff. If you're doing something that you're going out and interviewing people, your graphs don't look like this. They are full of what the people say. So you still send the results out no matter what kind of study you're doing, a program eval, whatever it is. Chapter 4 is the results. And Chapter 5 is so what? So you've done all this work. So what did it mean? Okay, it was significant. Okay, teachers hate this. So what? And you got to lay it back into literature and back into the bigger world of education and say, I love this part because after going through all of that rigmarole, I finally got to tell people what I wanted to tell them since I first started the study. This is, listen to me. This is my place where I can say something. So what? This is what it matters. And so you don't want to rush through this part, that last part, and rush to graduation because this is the part that you're going to write the article on afterwards. This is the part that you're going to stand up and do your defense. On 4 and 5 become your defense. I don't need a signal for that because everybody remembers defense. I don't need a signal for that. In your defense, you don't fight off questions that, what was the p-value in the third pair? No, it isn't a test. What you're doing is sharing to us and standing on your feet the big 3 to 5 ideas about so what. Okay, we've done this. You've spent a year of your life doing this. We've spent an afternoon listening to it. So what does it mean? Chapters 4 and 5 and the defense. Teach.
Okay.
Or you could somewhat resolve.
Class. Yes. That's okay. I'm not going to give you points for saying yes or okay right now, so I kind of went to add. Hopefully now, when somebody says, I'm ready for my proposal. You know, Scott Anderson? Matt Riga? Ready for proposal. Who else is there? We got a whole bunch of them. Khalid from Oman finished his proposal. People celebrate that moment because they have permission to do the study. They've got the first 3/5 of the thing written, and they know now what it is that they're going to spend the next months finishing, because at that point defense is in sight. You know where they're going with things. So what we have done is we have gone back and embedded parts of those into seminars with more or less success, depending upon where your mind was, where your professor's mind was, and how this all happens to go. But specifically, we're looking in at some point in this region that you kind of get to the place of having a problem statement. What's the problem you want to solve? If you don't have one, that might be what you write the literature background for this time. A lot of you kind of started to go there. You also need to remember that whole thing about what did everybody else know about this stuff? That takes a whole pile of journals, a whole pile of them. And so how do I slice that up into smaller pieces that I can do without, because what happens if you're like me is you start to read something and that makes you want to read something else, and pretty soon you're reading over here and, oh, this has to be in there too, and this, and it's getting to be so big, you're like, I can write the rest of my life on this thing, but I want to graduate in the next year, so how do I make that happen? So all of those things are happening in this area. At no point do we say to somebody, you've got to be at this particular point. If you're doing I'm approximating, understand everybody else is going to tweak it too and continue to make it stronger as they go closer to actual printed as a book. You don't have to be there, and I don't want to pressure you to that. But on the other hand, if you got to find a great article, that's one less article that has to be read later on, every time you do something with it. So I'm going back to that being critical idea again and thinking about how we think, some of the metacognition of it at a very basic level that is going to lead me to talking about doing literature with you in a couple of weeks. And so this comes from Wallace and Polis, I think are the names of the authors, but I cited on one of the slides. And they talk about that there actually are some schematics on how we can put things together to be critical consumers and producers, because we have to do both. First of all, we have to read critically so that we don't put a bunch of garbage into our scheme of what we're doing, that it's making sense to us and that we have some proof and belief behind it. And then we have to turn around and produce some of that ourselves and write some of that. So this is helping us both as consumers and producers. There are really 5 tools for thinking that according to this set of authors, and that the basic one that we work on is concepts. And it really doesn't matter whether you started teaching auto mechanics or computer programming or how to tie your shoe. There are concepts in that if we don't understand one another, I am really coming up against that a lot as I work with our master students from Saudi Arabia. And concepts that I think are just common sense are common sense American. And they aren't common sense. They're just commonly what we have used and we understand. And so understanding of concepts becomes a cornerstone of figuring out what concepts are in, what are not. And usually there's a concept that's a cornerstone of what you produce as the author. There's a concept you want people to understand better in some manner or format. Sometimes it's a full-blown theory, sometimes it's a pattern. But there are concepts, and so we need to understand what we're reading and doing and studying as concepts. From those concepts, by the way, there are perspectives. You know, when I talk about starting school with my Saudi Arabian students, they have a different picture in their mind than I do. Some things are very much exactly the same. There's anxiety with those, you know, there's family issues about, you know, what age. I mean, there's a lot of things that go on that are the same, but there are things that their perspective on it is very different than mine. And your perspective is also different than mine because we've lived a different set of experiences and we've read a different set of books and we've had a different set of friends that have helped to reinforce all those things. And so we need to stop and think about what's the perspective. When I'm reading something or when I'm writing something, what are we assuming? What are the perspectives that we're looking at things through? Third tool for thinking is metaphor. Metaphor is an underused, you know, now my herding cats was a metaphor, right? Leadership was herding cats. I obviously don't herd any little furry animals. They seemed like it sometimes, but they weren't, you know. But it helped us, that whole thing, before you saw the commercial, when I said leadership is herding cats, you felt like it was an organized chaos. I mean, that's what I was saying, is leadership is organized, meaningful chaos for a purpose. Wasn't that a boring sentence? Herding cats made it richer, fuller, and it's something that you can think about as you're looking at what you're studying is how do I explain it in terms of other things that other people already understand? There are also theories and models. You will have a theory or a model that underpins your new study. You know, every study has that question behind the question. Remember I talked about Dr. Beach's study about why some people become a principal and some people don't? Well, what's the theory behind that? Motivation theory. What makes you want to or not want to do something? And so he went back in and studied a motivation theory. Say that, let's see how that works with this population and what's going on with that. I've said about that. I want to get to this one. The second piece, and again, this doesn't line up with chapters or anything like that. It's because I did 5 chapters. This is just another 5, and it's like we're on Magic 5 night, I guess. Another piece of this model was, though, talking about when we're being critical, there are 2 dimensions that help us to understand how much we should believe something or not. We want our stuff, when we're writing it, we want it not to be vulnerable to attack. That's not true. We want people to say, oh, yes, that's the way the world is, and yes, you're right, author. You know, we want to be low vulnerable. High vulnerable stuff is open to attack. And there's 2 ways that make things be open to that kind of attack. One is generalizing too far. And you know that when you had your child come home and say, but everybody's getting their ears pierced, or whatever that thing was, right? They just generalize too much because your answer is, oh, really? Is Michael getting his ears pierced? Is Mary getting her ears pierced? You know, and you went after that generalization, said everybody is not getting their ears pierced just because somebody you know is. They would have been much better. They would have gotten less vulnerable to you if they'd have said, this person's mother has said they can, and this person's mother said they can. And this is the criteria that they used, you know, that because they're 9, they get to, or whatever those things are. When we generalize too far, when we look at 23 third graders and say this reading program doesn't work, you know, when we generalize too much and say this theory works for all nations, all teachers, all whatever, it makes it weaker. And we got to watch that when we're reading. 2. The other one is how certain are they of that? Again, when they said, this is the way it is, we all know, we've lived long enough to know that every rule has an exception. Everything has it. Every study you ever will read ever has a flaw. You just acknowledge it and move on. okay, I only looked at 23 kids, but this is what I learned from those 23 kids. And I don't generalize it, and I don't overblow it in saying, you know, I learned this great, big, humongous thing from talking to interviewing 6 teachers. I learned something important, but you limit that. When people don't say, you know what, there's some flaws here I want you to know about, there's some limitations of what's going on, it raises the red flags. Those same concepts and ideas and metaphors, those tools for thinking, lead us to different types of thinking. The reason I bring that to you tonight is one of these is more popular to you. You could hear in the room as people talk about some things that some of these have some holes in some people's way of putting their knowledge together.
Dr. Kaiser, can we go back just for 1 second?
Yes, ma'am.
What is this telling us?
This is telling us when you're reading,
When
you're
you're
writing,
okay.
you've got to watch when they generalize too much and when they're too confident about what they had to say. You will lose 25 pounds in 7 weeks in this thing. Really, I know I can figure out a way that I wouldn't. You know, I know that type
I was
of thing.
thinking, if I didn't know much and I really didn't have any specific examples, how could that be very good information?
What you're
that
looking
I
for
see?
is as they're putting
As they're-
out
okay.
that they know something.
Okay.
I'm an expert. I know something.
I don't
That's
know
when this is in
everything.
play. I don't know everything, and it doesn't work for everybody.
Okay.
Thank you. So there are people that say, just give me the research. I want to know what the data says. And there are people that say, you know what, I want to look and see what does this really mean? What's the philosophical background behind this? How does it work? You know, what is it all really about? And there's those people who say, you know, I only know for me and my family, this is the way it works. For me and my school, I've taught for 25 years. I know how to teach those 6th graders, and you're telling me this new way. Well, sometimes they're absolutely right, and sometimes they've pushed it too far. What we need to be able to do is, you can see all those lines between those things. Yes, if you're going to use research, then you're going to not generalize too much. And yes, if you're going to use theories, you're going to use concepts people understand. And you're going to use all of these together. This makes more sense when I talk about the types of literature. They match up with this. There's the theory kind. And this is when you're reading the article about why we should do block scheduling, or why reflection is good for teachers, or those types of things. And they try to explain what the concepts are, and they're great, unless they're based on false assumptions. You have to make sure that they are telling you what their perspective is, where they're coming from, what they're basing this on, and not just live in the theory of, I thought so, so this is it. It's amazing how many, when you dig down into some of the research that we use as decision-making research in schools, it's amazing how much of it doesn't stand up to some of these flaws. In research, you're going to be doing a systematic investigation, and you got to have some others besides your own. You can't live on theories. You can't live on research. You need them both. But it's that garbage in, garbage out. You know, if I'm reading a study and they're talking to me about retention of new teachers, and I look and I see that the study was done in Hawaii. That may be a very, very valid thing for me, but I have to stop and think, are all those factors in Hawaii the same factors in Nebraska today? It's not. And so, did they take that into play? Did they say, you know, that yes, the cost of living is more, but you know the culture is supportive, or whatever those things? Did they put those things in here and let us know what it was that stood behind that? The practice, you know, there's nothing like, I gained stature with you when I said I'm going to do my dissertation defense in front of you tonight, because there's nothing like saying I've been there, I've done it, and I survived, and you can do it too. And so there's nothing like that voice of practice. But if that voice is the only one, you're only getting the experience of that person. You need the rest of this too. And then finally, the fourth kind of literature is policy. And policy is looking at more of the social world and articulating how the interplay of things are, whether it's rules, laws, procedures, those types of things. Finally, as you're going out to reading, you ask your author that you're sitting there looking at that article, why'd you write this? Why'd you write this? What's the purpose? Are you trying to help me understand more about this issue? Are you trying to help me judge what's going on this way versus that way? Are you trying to get me to take some action and do some things differently than I've done before? What is the reason why? And instrumentalism and reflexive action, I'm not really going to go there too much. It's a specific type of literature that you're trying to do. A reflexive action, it has to do with your part of the action of what's going on as the reader. It doesn't happen very often. Those top three are the ones that really happen the most. It colors and sets, if you know why they're doing what they're doing, or you're watching and saying, why is this author saying this? Oh, they're trying to get me to understand. That's different than if they're trying to move you to action. And that persuasive piece plays differently with you. So why have I said all this stuff to you tonight? It's time for you to go out and start building a bigger pile. Notice I didn't say start a pile. Building a bigger pile of the stuff that you're reading that matters in what you want to be an expert in. Your dissertation, I will say to you 80 times before you finish it, is a tiny slice of the pie. The whole pie is the expert of what you're going to be an expert in. You will read all kinds of things that critically will say, nice, but not for my study. Not worth the paper it was written on, and so forth. And you're going to be making those judgments immediately. So on the last page, if I think it was right, I had a title.
Yes.
I'm sorry, the last page of tonight. I put next week's right with tonight, so I felt sorry for people that had to. So it's evaluating titles. So it really is in the middle of the handout. Okay? This is your group project tonight, because you're going to go out, right? You open up the journal, or you look at the database, or you Google stuff, and very often you choose what you're going to read and what you're not going to read based on what the title is. So I'd like you to think about titles tonight, because nobody's going to talk to you about it later. Here's a couple things to write in the edges. In your dissertation, it's ready to go if it's got less than 10 words in the dissertation. When you're writing a paragraph-long title, who's going to read that thing? And secondly, can't you figure it out closer than less than 12 words? And you don't want to have some of this stuff that's in there. So this is a page to keep for when you're trying to figure out that important thing called, what's the title of this thing going to be? And you're not going to go home and figure that out tonight. But tonight, you're going to think about reading stuff based on its title. So there's a little activity for you to choose to do with a whole group, or you can split your group up, or if somebody wants to do it all by themselves, that doesn't mean they're unfriendly, that's the kind of learner they are. And so, within your group, evaluate some titles. The only outcome that I'm going to expect to hear back from here is questions like I'm not sure about, or ahas, oh, well, it was interesting to note that, or I learned that, or this group thought about, so it's just like learnings and questions. There will be no specific right or wrong answers to that.
Yeah, but there's some criminals.